Hey, what's going on, people? This is Balaji, and welcome to another episode of Demand Wars. Now, he's the founder of Antidote, the B2B audience development agency. He's the publisher of Pros, the newsletter that explores the science of B2B brand building. He's worked with brands like Career Karma, Gorgeous, Loop. He's built amazing marketing campaigns for clients like Chick-fil-A, Keller Williams, Teach for America. Please help me welcome from Chi-Town, Morehouse graduate, Darien Payton. What up, Darien?
What's up, Villaji? That was a great intro. I like that.
Hey, man. Your reputation precedes you, man. I'm just trying to let the people know what it is. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
And the first fellow Morehouse College graduate. For those who know, if you know, you know. Morehouse is the
If you know, you
Ivy
know.
League, Ivy League of historically black colleges. Both Darien and I attended that same college in Atlanta, Georgia. Darien, what do you miss most about living in Atlanta and going to Morehouse College?
A lot. Actually, I was just talking about cookout the other day. We don't have a cookout in Chicago, so maybe food is first. Two,
The
I mean,
Cookout franchise. Yeah, we have it here in North
yeah,
Carolina. It's
like
great.
yeah, we need that and a few other franchises. Like we don't have a Zaxby's, and we've got
Uh,
Cane's. I think Zaxby's a little better. But we need a Zaxby's in Chicago. That and like Morehouse was just an amazing community. If you think about like I'm not sure what the split of the audience is here, but if folks understand what the community is like at a Stanford or a
mm,
Harvard,
mm,
like imagine that sort of community, that sort of network in a predominantly black space, and it's amazing. So I really do miss the community. I When we joined, there's this conversation about Morehouse Mystique, and you don't understand it when you get there. You're like, what is that? And then you get out, and you're like, oh, I got a better grasp on what the Mystique part of it is, and just like that community that's built there. So anyway,
I
but
love it.
most of it is the food. I mostly miss the food and the warm weather. Chicago's too cold.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Hey, Darren, you talk a lot. I discovered Darien's work through, on LinkedIn, and then I subscribed to Pros, his newsletter. Excellent, excellent. Darren is a tastemaker. He's able to sort of gather together the best, trendiest social media practitioners that are out there, and audience development practitioners as well. So I'm always learning stuff every time I read Pros. But you sometimes you got a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, Darian. Sometimes something kind of tick you off now. You seem to have a problem with lights on social strategies. Could you
Mm.
explain to the people what do you mean when you're talking about lights on social strategies?
Yeah, this is a chip on my shoulder. So lights on social strategy is like a derivative of the idiom like keep the lights on,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a complete waste of time and money.
Like do
For
the bare minimum.
the bare minimum.
Okay.
It's basically when companies see any marketing program or strategy, or there are maybe a few functions within a business that make sense to do the bare minimum in order to make sure you're not, running adrift of law, or you're not, doing something that jeopardizes the entirety of the business. But
Mm-hmm.
in marketing, there's practically no program that's worth doing the bare minimum for, because if marketing's job is to create demand, and if you're doing the bare minimum, you're not creating demand. And so a lot of B2B and B2C companies tend to run like these, what I call lights on social strategies, where they do the absolute bare minimum, check off the box of like, oh, we did post something this week. And whether it was interesting, whether our audience actually engaged with it, whether we actually thought the content that we posted was good, doesn't matter. We posted though. We
Mm-hmm.
did something. So if just in case somebody comes to our page, they
Yeah.
see that we're active.
Active.
And it's a waste of time and money.
Wow.
It's especially a waste of time and money if you're hiring somebody to run a lights on social strategy. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, that is something I've got a chip on my shoulder about.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Okay, Darren, tell us how you really feel. Right.
Oh
What
yeah, that's one of grinds my gears.
what I want to know though, Darian, is when I started learning about Antidote, your marketing agency that you've been running for a little while now, you seem to focus on this term, this phrase, audience development. Now, I'm very familiar, Darien, with social media agencies. I get demand generation agencies. Why did you choose to focus specifically on audience development?
Yeah, this is interesting. We're going through some changes on how we describe that, but I'll talk a little bit about audience development.
Mm-hmm.
One of the end goal of social in our mind is to drive demand. And so that's kind of some of the changes that we're making in the future and how we describe the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
But a huge part of driving demand is having an audience that you can talk to in the first place. And that's where the audience development part came from. A lot of brands that I've worked with in the past, and then some of the earliest clients that we had were focused on like driving leads and
Yeah.
like make sure that we're driving folks back to the site and we're driving site traffic. And we're big believers in social driving bottom line business results. And
Okay.
bottom line may not always or may not solely mean revenue. It can be other metrics that are business focused metrics.
Mm.
But none of that happens without first building an audience that is engaged, that cares about what your company, your product does, and also the mission, the narrative that you stand for, your worldview.
Mm.
And so we were our endeavor rather is to make sure that brands think first from the audience's perspective and making sure that you're first focused on building an audience that actually cares. And so that's
Mm.
the audience development part. And then you can focus on the driving demand part. Then you can
Mm.
focus on like, all right, how do you get people to the site? How do you get people to sign up for stuff? But if you don't have an audience that cares in the beginning, none of the rest of that stuff
Wow.
happens or matters.
Wow. Wow. It's almost like the tail wagging the dog sort of thing. I think a lot of
Mhm.
companies, maybe by necessity, start from, at least by the time we learn about them, they come to market with a product.
Mhm.
And their objective at that point is find someone to buy the product, right? So it almost feels a little bit the opposite of what you're talking about, where if companies are able to come to market with a point of view about what audience they're most interested in serving, and then they can start to accumulate that audience based on that point of view that they have, maybe it becomes a more effective way to eventually sell products.
100%. And I mean, along the way, some of the things that people get scared about when they hear that is, oh, well, then we have to wait a long time. And I know this is a demand creation and a podcast. So, but I think there's a misnomer in this idea of like build an audience that cares about your POV first, and then eventually they'll convert.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who are in the market today that may have never heard of you. And as you're building your audience, they may become audience members. So it's not that you have to push all demand capture 6 months away, or
Oh,
9 months away, or 12 months away. It's
okay.
that you recognize and you respect each channel, each program for
Mm,
what they're best at.
mm,
Right. And social is not the best channel for capturing demand, although it does do that.
mm-hmm,
And so, I think the crux of it is or build this audience, this community of people who care about what your product does, what you solve, and communicate a clear narrative to them. And
mm,
then, to your point, they'll some will sign up today. Some
mm-hmm.
who are in the market and are just finding out about you, they got a pressing need, will sign up today. Some will
Okay.
sign up in 3 months, and the bulk of them will come at a later point. But
Mm.
you won't ever get to the later point if you don't start today.
Wow. 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 You know, um, Darren, there's this term, the flywheel, that I
Mhm.
think HubSpot made popular a few years ago. You've sort of maybe updated that or created a different version for this whole concept of audience development, and and I'd love for you to talk through your vision of a marketing flywheel. Ideally, a lot of us marketers would love something where you put in a lot of energy at the beginning to build a framework, And then after a while, it gains momentum and it starts to keep going on its own, and it feeds itself. What's your vision of a marketing flywheel?
Oh, this is a good question. So I normally think of flywheels in terms of demand,
Mm-hmm.
or like programs,
Mm-hmm.
demand programs. And I think my vision of a marketing flywheel is one that focuses on creating content.
Mm,
And the reason, let me put a pin there and describe that. The reason that I think creating content is the pinnacle of the flywheel is because it's where your audience is. Your audience is consuming content.
yeah.
I was looking at a stat the other day that says that the average American, I don't know what it is on a global scale, but the average American, according to a study from, I want to say, the University of California,
Mm.
uh, reads about 64 gigabytes, I think it's 67 gigabytes of information and data every day. They
What?
consume 67 gigabytes of data and information every day. Well, that includes your audience.
Mm-hmm.
That includes your prospect buyer. That includes the people that you are trying to sell to. And so the pinnacle of the flywheel, maybe the spoke, the thing that starts it all is being able to create content.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, it's about how do we distribute this content? How do we build this community? The real flywheel is the community that you're building. So you're creating content, you're attracting people to your individual channels.
Right.
So that's YouTube, that's Twitter, that's LinkedIn, that's Instagram, whatever channels make sense most to you. And then you're finding ways to bring those people together into more intimate environments.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from, all right, you've got this distance through the social channels, and now we're trying to bring you together in a smaller knit community. So whether I don't like the term webinars, although webinars have some effect. But maybe they're virtual meets. Maybe they are in-person meets. If you can pull those off, those are really, really powerful to be able to do in-person meets. So it's mostly about the 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 best flywheel focuses on creating for where your audience is today, and then finding ways to bring them together so that you can build deeper relationships.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That's really cool. I love that concept of the flywheel. It's always been something that I've been interested in. Build once and then have it. Maybe it
Mm.
doesn't go on forever, but it feeds on itself, and it's almost like a virtuous cycle of sorts. So I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful. We're gonna come back to that idea in a little bit. But Darien, I'd love, with your permission, to get you started on the demand wars questions. So
Let's do it.
if you're ready, my man says he's ready. Okay, we're gonna see now. We're gonna see.
Let's do it.
First question, Darien, is desert island market. So you're on a
Yeah.
desert island. It's deserted. No one else is there. You got to figure out your own food, your own shelter, your own water. All we're giving you is a laptop. You do have internet access. Don't ask me how. It's a high tech desert, and you have $1,000 a month budget. How will you take a client's brand to market and help them create demand?
Mm. Let me, and this part might need to be edited out. I'm creating demand. Is the client the desert island?
So essentially, you have a brand. It could either be your personal B2B brand, it could be
Okay.
Antidote, or it
Hmm.
could be, since you happen to run an agency, it could be one of your clients. And they say,
Hmm.
Darien, we need your help. We've got to create demand. All we have is $1,000 a month to spend. Nobody knows who we are. How are you going to create demand for a brand new B2B company?
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm going to approach this from two different angles.
Okay.
One, if how I would do it if it were my own personal brand, and then two, how I would do it for what I would do for a client
All
if
right.
I were remote of them.
Cool.
All right. So for my personal brand, the answer is easy. Create a vlog. Go to YouTube, phone or laptop, maybe even to face, and just like, since we already have Wi-Fi, we've got a laptop, we've got what we need to create and upload content to the internet. I would be focused on creating a vlog showing my life of living on this deserted island. How am I getting food? How am I getting water? What is the process like? And I might be like taking some of that content, trying to get it to TikTok. And it's like very, very internet boyish. But I think it would be super interesting to figure out like what is somebody doing? How can you recreate Naked and Afraid
Ah.
except without all of the TV cameras, right? And maybe without the naked part. That's probably what I would do if it were my own brand. And I'd find ways to talk about how I'm building my brand or building whatever my company is or whatever my service is, or software, product,
Mm,
from this island.
mm,
So here's my life of building this company on this island.
mm,
And here's what it's like when I'm not building a company. I think
mm,
that'd be super interesting to get people to like me.
mm.
I probably wouldn't even need the $1,000 budget to do that, to be quite frank. For the company now, if I'm running for a client, I'm trying to run their brand and I'm deserted and I've only got $1,000. Again, focus on content. And all of the $1,000 budget would go to distribution. So focus on creating content around narrative. Focus on creating content around what the product solves, the RPOV, on social platforms. The ones that matter most for B2B companies are probably Twitter and LinkedIn. If you can pull it off, there is a lot of white space on YouTube. If you can pull it off, shows like Demand Wars, where it's a lot less stuffy, I think really work for YouTube. Most B2B brands can't pull it off for a few different reasons. But if you can, YouTube also works. But let's just say we're doing Twitter and LinkedIn. I'd be figuring out ways to create content around what we're doing, figuring out ways to talk with that client, like show me your inside process. Can we get on a Zoom call? Can we record some of the meetings that you're having with internally? And then the $1,000 would go all to distribution, meaning paid media. The $1,000 would go to let's run some LinkedIn ads against the content that's performing best, the organic content. So organic becomes our testing channel. Paid media becomes our distribution channel.
Wow.
And this is how we generate the demand. So we figure out what's working. Obviously, we already understand the platforms. We understand like what nuances make certain pieces of content work. We take the best performing, we put it in front of our audience on LinkedIn ads and Twitter ads, and that's how we start to build this community.
Interesting, very interesting. Organic is our testing channel, paid is our distribution channel. And
Yeah.
you're actually creating it's almost like you're using this desert island to your advantage. You're creating this is like a MacGyver approach. You're creating content that's not highly produced. You're using what's
Mm-hmm.
immediately available to you. You mentioned though, Darien, that some brands might not either be able to pull this off or maybe willing to pull this off. Why do you feel like certain B2B companies, certain B2B brands are a bit more hesitant to pull back the curtain, build in public, show a little bit more of how the sausage is made, so to speak?
I think there are a few reasons. Number one, is a misconception about what is actually interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of B2B companies think that their products are inherently or their services are inherently uninteresting,
Yeah.
which is actually a flip on what most people might think. I think most people think that their product, a marketing team or a CEO might think their product is more interesting than it is. What I've found is that most people discount how interesting running a company can be.
Hmm.
And so that would be number one. Get out of your head about what you think is interesting and not interesting. There are a lot of people who have a ton of interest in just seeing how the sausage is made. And there is a lot of value in that and building community, building trust, and building reputation. The second thing is if you're past that point, I think a lot of people also think that your secrets are going to be stolen. Um,
Yeah.
and there is no real secret at this point. Maybe if you're a software company, is proprietary data or something that is proprietary code. But more and more, as more people are sharing things on the internet, everything kind of goes to being readily and publicly accessible.
Hmm.
So the things that the pool of things that are actually proprietary, actually secretive or secret sauce gets really small in the software world. Maybe that's different in other industries where they do have a little bit more power to lock down what needs to be theirs. So if you think about some of the biggest companies in it, like the Googles, or if you even think about like some hard science companies where they have the ability to lock out new entrants, that may be different there. But software, it's generally not the case. And I think if you think that you are protecting some secret sauce, what you're probably doing is locking your audience out, and locking even your customers out, because you don't want to share information. And you're like, oh no, someone's going to tell or steal our stuff. It generally isn't the case. I found that people are stealing something from you. And if they are, spicy take, if they are, it's probably not that much of a secret sauce.
Fair point. Fair point. I can't argue with that. Okay, so this is pretty cool. I'm liking some of the creative ideas we have on Darien's Island. We're gonna see if we can stretch you a little bit, because I feel like you knocked that one out the park pretty easy. So, okay, you were able to handle having very limited budget. For this next challenge, Darien, we're gonna give you an unlimited budget, but now we need that demand created fast. This sometimes happens to us marketers. So we'd love for you to tackle this 3 different ways, Darien. You've been asked to create demand in 3 days, then in 3 weeks, and then finally in 3 months. How would you go about thinking through these extreme constraints?
Okay. So 3 days, my constraint is virality, or the thing that I'm looking for is virality.
Huh.
I'm looking to figure out what are the channels. If I have unlimited budget, I can essentially force virality by spending the money on paid media. But again, we're running with the idea that organic social is our testing channel. So we want to go somewhere where we can post high frequency, kind of figure out what ideas might work, or we might be pulling from like historical knowledge of what works. So 3 days, I'd be focused on like TikTok, which is interesting for B2B companies. Like, you're probably not thinking about TikTok much, or maybe you are, but you probably haven't figured it out. I'd be trying to figure out how to talk to people on the street with something tangentially related to, like, this is the street interview thing that is very popular already on TikTok, but I think there's always some angle for B2B companies. There's always some angle for any company that would make it interesting. So let's say I am a finance software company. For 3 days, I am now finding people on the street, trying to talk to them and ask them, all right, how do you think about money? How much, like, get really personal and get interesting. How much money do you have in your bank account?
Wow.
Can you show us? Like, can you show us what's in your bank account? If I'm a B2B finance, or like maybe let's say I'm a credit card company, or
Right.
like something like that.
Right.
I'm going to Wall Street. I'm like standing outside on Wall Street. How much money do you have in your like bank account? How much money did you spend this year, or how much did you make in returns for your clients?
Yeah.
Like, I'm asking some of these really that most of the world is not talking about, because virality is typically about trendiness, hopping onto an existing conversation, or about novelty. And there is a lot of novelty in learning what other people make or have. So that'd be 3 days. And I'd probably spend a lot of money on just boosting those posts. If I've got 3 weeks to pull something together, I might try to pull together like a community meet, or some sort of like flash mob. So these may be 2 different ideas. A community meet where I can get everybody, like the biggest influencers that I can, to relevant influencers. So they shouldn't be like, don't try to go get like Beyonce for your product.
No, not Beyonce.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the budget. Maybe she'd show up. As a matter of fact, an interesting idea might be to have a private concert with Beyonce. That the last one she did in wherever she was, maybe Saudi Arabia, it actually went viral. So maybe it is. Maybe do get Beyonce. But Anyway, I'd be trying to get influencers, get them all together, get some prospective clients in the room, pay for their dinners. If we got unlimited budget, pay for their flight, pay for their dinners, and try to get the community together talking. People who are prospective clients, current clients, get them all in the same room. Let's talk to them. So maybe the first week and a half, I'm trying to work out logistics. The second week, I'm actually working out. All right. Before they get here, what is our experience like for them before they get here? This should be A plus, like absolute best experience possible. So that means we're seating them with some sort of product, some sort of gift before they get here. Once they get here, once they're already here, it's white glove service. No expense spared on making sure they feel like they're having the best experience ever. It shouldn't feel like going to a software company or tech company conference. It should feel like going to some like award show or some very high class experience for them if we're to create demand. What we're really trying to do is create conversation. So that would be my second one. 3 months is actually interesting. I'd probably put on an award show. If I'm trying to create demand, I'd put on an award show, get people inside of my industry to nominate for a bunch of different categories, right? Let's go back to the finance category. What are the best advertisers in B2B tech, right? And like, we obviously, what we'd be judging on is like, who has the best ads? What company does the best marketing? And then maybe there's a category for best CFO. Or like top ranked CFO, and then top ranked CEO, and then maybe there's a category for most innovative startup, and then maybe like, so I'd be going through these categories of awards and getting the rest of the community involved and like nominating folks. Again, create conversation and then host an in-person show. We've got 3 months, not a lot of time, but we've got 3 months. Try to figure out a way. Again, unlimited budget makes this easy. Try to figure out a way to get everybody to one spot and do an actual award show. Like, can we create the Oscars? Can we create the Oscars of whatever our category is? And that's what I'd be focused on for 3 months.
Darien, so you use this term in a couple of those scenarios that in seeking to create demand, we're actually looking to create conversations. I've never heard that. I've never heard that before, but it resonates. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind unpacking, like, what's the idea behind that? When we talk about creating demand in B2B context, a lot of times we're ultimately thinking about leads, pipeline, right, and revenue. Why conversations?
Few reasons. Number one, FOMO. There's just a human psychology thing. I don't want to be the one person outside of what people know or what other people are doing. Like, I don't want to be an outsider. And so if everyone's talking about something, naturally people are going to become interested. If my friend is using this app and your friend is using, and their friend is using that app and this other friend is using the same, I'm going to want to figure out what's going on with this particular app and get involved. But the same is actually true for software. Given that the software doesn't have a super high ACV or super high barrier to entry, right? If you're talking about something like Salesforce, it's going to be harder to do the kind of conversational virality thing, but still possible. But if you're talking about something that's a little bit on a cheaper end of monthly subscription costs, or is PLG and maybe you have some freemium model, it's easier to do, right? You're trying to get people to start conversations in order to create FOMO. The second thing is trust. If I am being sold by a company, it's going to take a lot longer for that trust to be built, right? Because they have it's perverse incentives, right? Their incentive is to get me sold versus if I'm talking to a friend and this friend is recommending this particular software, their incentive is just to see me win. If they're a good friend, right? Their incentive is to see me win, and they don't have the same sort of incentive to just sell me on something. So if I can generate as the company, if I could get people talking about us in a private or in a positive manner, I can start to create some. I can create incentives, or at least use leverage better incentives by allowing people to talk about us, promote us in a way that would build trust a lot faster than if we did it ourselves.
I love that, Darren. And I'm not going to let you get by with using the term perverse incentives. Without breaking
Well,
that down, I was like, hold up. Let me go Google this right quick. That sounds crazy. Perverse incentives, man. Talk about it, man. Like, what are perverse incentives?
so generally, like every company is at the end of the day, you're trying to make money,
Yeah,
right? You're trying
yeah,
to drive revenue.
yeah.
Well, I know that as a customer or as a prospect.
True.
And so I know in a lot of cases, companies are going to be willing to say whatever, do whatever in order to get the
Get
sale.
the sale.
And
Yeah.
so that makes me coming out as a sophisticated buyer. And if you don't believe your buyers, your audience, your prospects are sophisticated, they are very sophisticated. They're not coming to you with no context. The today's B2B buyer is doing a ton of research before they come to you. They're talking to friends. They're talking to industry peers and colleagues before they get to your door. They're not coming in completely lost on what could be or what they're looking for. So if I am a sophisticated buyer, I already know kind of what I'm looking for and what is out there, what options exist in the world
Right.
or in my category.
Right.
So I'm not I've already got this guard up. Like, all right, how do you compare to what the other solutions are?
Yep.
And I know that you know that, and so your job is to sell me on what you do best, and you're going to only tell me the things you do best. There are very few companies that are actually honest about who they're best for, and are actively engaged in ruling out the companies that do not fit for them, right? Most companies are like, hey, just give me all the leads. And this is the problem with the MQL drama. It's like, just give me anybody, and we'll try to sell them. And if money is money, green is green. And buyers know that. And so it creates what I'm calling a perverse incentive, because your only incentive is to sell them, and buyers are recognize that, and because of that they are trying to be more educated before they come in the door so they can call you out when they feel like you're not being honest.
So
Mm. Phew.
presentation that they promised turned out to be 2.5 hours. And where it was, they said presentation, it was a high pressure, wave after
Pitch.
wave, pitch, right? Like I tell this guy no, then he goes to the back room. He gets the manager who pitches me all over again. I tell that guy no, he goes to get the other. Oh,
Yeah.
perverse incentives.
Yeah.
Perverse incentive. I love that. I love that. That's dope. That's dope. All right, cool. So Darien, let's transition a little bit. You in this world of thinking about audience development and seeking to create conversation that then leads to the creation of demand ultimately for our products, you've shared in Prose, your newsletter, a little bit about some of the stuff that's happening in the streaming world, like on Netflix. And this next question, we call it marketing like a media company, right? So we've got Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. There's so many different vendors right now that are blazing trails for what's possible, but they're not in the B2B space. You shared though, there was a great anecdote that you shared. This dude called Ben Silverman. I'd never heard of him. Apparently, he's the producer of The Office, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell the story of how this is on Gary Vee's show not too long ago.
Mhm.
Could you tell the story of how Ben Silverman broke down Netflix's entry into the documentary world?
Yeah. So this was super interesting.
Mm,
So Ben realized that there was an uptick in the amount of documentaries that people were starting to watch and look for.
mhm.
I think it was across other categories. You took me way back. I forgot about that episode. I think it was in or other providers
Right.
that they were looking at, and they were seeing this uptick also inside their company of like the amount of viewership that was happening for documentaries. And eventually, they made this pivot where they were like creating more and more documentaries and seeing the amount of streamers
Huh.
that were watching documentaries. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was starting to surpass the other categories
Mm,
of content that they were creating.
mm,
And I think this goes to one of the points that I think is key for B2B companies to understand today
mhm,
about content creation,
mhm,
which is everyone cares about the story. It's the story. You're selling a story because there is a ton of content out there. And when there is an abundance of content, the content that does end up winning is the one that's best able to sell people or to tell a story. It's not going to be the content that necessarily gives the most facts. It's not going to be the content that necessarily gets the most novel information. And in certain industries or certain sectors where information is the gold, is the oil, that does matter, right? If you're in finance, for example, you're trading on information. You're trading on the arbitrage of what do you know, how fast do you know it, when, like that sort of thing. But generally, for B2B companies, you're not trading on information. You're trading on story. Because you have competitors out there that have the same information that you do, or maybe similar information that you have to what you have. And so it's really about your ability to capture your audience through great storytelling. And I think Netflix realizing that, and then the uptick in docuseries, the uptick in documentary, like pretty much any major story has become a Netflix documentary. I just recently watched the story on Malaysia 370. The flight, I think it's 370, but the flight that went down or went disappearing first.
Disappeared. It
It
went
just
missing. Yeah. It went missing.
disappeared
Yeah.
a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, where's this flight? How does a plane with, I think, maybe 300 people on the plane,
Mhm.
how does it just disappear out of thin air? Like, gone. And nobody could figure it out. And then they eventually, to tell a story, sorry, spoiler alert, I guess it went down in a remote part of the Indian Ocean. But this had become a documentary for Netflix because it was such an interesting story. And I think B2B companies can pull of the same kind of framework, which is like, what are the stories that are interesting around our product or around our category? What are we noticing, and how do we tell those stories in ways that our audience consume? Because the end goal with content, and this is maybe another framework, the end goal with content is consumption.
True.
It's when we talk about demand, before you can get to demand, you want people to consume, and the things that people are consuming today are stories.
That's crazy. When you talked about the plane that went missing, Malaysia 370, whatever the number
Mhm.
was, and then you're like, spoiler alert, it went down in the Indian Ocean. You basically told, if we're just looking for the facts, you could say there was this plane with hundreds of people, it went missing. Turns out it was in the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah,
That took all of 10 seconds. And yet there's a 2-hour documentary that's been watched by millions of people, illustrating your point that it's not just the facts, it's the way you can weave those facts together into a narrative, a story that engages people and causes them to consume them. And not only that, you're building a habit. Because after people consume one good documentary, what do? They're looking for the
they
next one.
look at another one, and
More.
you're 100% right. The funny thing about this is the trailer for this documentary actually kind of gave you up front what was going to happen. And I mean, like, this was years ago,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
anybody could have figured out what
That's a
happened
good
without
point.
having to watch
We
this
know
story.
how it ends.
But you know how it ends coming up.
Yeah.
Yet
Yeah.
they hooked you over a couple of episodes because this was a docuseries.
That's crazy.
A few episodes, they hook you in basically just by figuring out how to tell you this story in a way that keeps you engaged.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So I'd love your thoughts, Darian, just to go a little deeper on this and how we could actually start to find out the interesting stories around our category. I get the examples that you're
Mm,
sharing. They're so
mm,
illustrative. I'm like, yeah, I get it. But when it comes to applying it to my own business, I'm like, I don't know where to find it. Like, I feel like these stories aren't interesting. How do we build that muscle?
mm. Look for conversations with customers. It's always going to be conversations.
Mm,
What questions are common? What questions frequently come up? What sorts of ideas are you being asked about, right? What sort of common pain points come up when you talk to
mm,
customers? And there are lots of different things that you can spin on that. There are ways where, like, when you're talking about telling a story, one way that there are a few different formats that a story can take place. It could be narrative driven stories. It can be comedic stories, right?
mm,
And that may lend itself to game shows or like contests and that sort of thing, which do have a narrative to them, but they're just told through jokes or told through like funny interactions. So you're looking for common pain points. And all of this again, reviews, customer support calls, or if you're doing customer support emails, wherever you're commonly interacting with customers.
wow.
Also, conversations with peers if you're in the same industry. So let's
Yeah.
say you're a subject matter expert in your category. If you're in that same and you sell marketing software to marketers,
Marketers. Yeah.
and you're a marketer. So then what other conversations are you having with peers in that industry about the toils of being a marketer?
Right.
And then that sort of insight starts to breed different ideas,
Yeah.
or at least angles. And those angles can then be brought out into different ideas.
Man. Every answer you give, I'm coming up with three follow-ups. Like, duh, okay. We gotta stick to the script though, Darian. Stop trying to distract me. All right. We gotta stump Darian. Come on, people. We gotta do better. All right, Darian. Let's see if we can hit you with a different one. We're gonna go to reality roulette, Darian. Okay? Gloves are
Okay.
coming off. The gloves are coming off. So with reality roulette, we're taking one of our favorite shows, or either a famous or an infamous show, reality show from the past 20 years of TV, and we want to remix that for B2B marketers, right? So what's a good reality show that we could take inspiration from and remix it as a B2B reality TV show?
Wow. Um, this is a good question.
All right, think
The
about it.
I
Think
would
about it.
um so oh that's too spicy. Um
That's the one we want, Darian. Rewind. We want the
so
spice.
the Donald Trump's show, I'm drawing a blank on the name right
The
now.
Apprentice. The Apprentice.
The
Yeah.
Apprentice. That making of the band, Diddy's show or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever that was, I think would be super interesting.
Mhm.
And the reason why is like we all marketers, myself included, think we're really good
True.
at the stuff that we do.
Fair.
And we think our opinions are really well thought through,
Yeah.
but there's not a real good litmus test for how well a marketer actually operates and executes. And so it's based on, because we're marketers, we get this honest, but it's based on who can tell the best story,
Hmm.
who can who can communicate their thoughts in a way that is most concise, most coherent and legible. But you'd want to find a way to actually see who has insights, who has knowledge and executional skills that translates to real results. So I think an apprentice like show or making of the band where you put marketers against each other, or Chopped probably is a less polarizing version of this. But where you put marketers up against each other with campaign ideas and go execute on a campaign, it would have to be over a longer time span. Obviously, you can't do it in a couple of hours, but execute on this campaign and see who comes back with the best results, I think would be super interesting.
I love that. You said as marketers, we think we're really good. I was like, yeah, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, yeah, myself included. I get it honest. I think I'm great. So yeah,
But that's
put us to
great
the
though.
test.
It's funny because okay, so one of the sports I enjoy watching is the NBA, and you get to
Mm,
see each year how much these athletes care about what the money aside, how much they care about this trophy, right? They could probably go buy their own doggone trophy if they wanted, but they
mm.
crave
Yes.
that trophy so much because it's a symbol of them putting in the work, competing against the best competitors in the world, and coming out on top. And I do
Yep.
think marketers would get up. It would raise all of our games. It would raise all of our games to get into a
Yep.
competition like that.
Yep, 100%. And I think it would be fun. I think it would be really fun to see what ideas come out of it. We also need a new spark of creativity anyway.
Wow.
Uh, so I think putting marketers, forcing the creativity out of marketers would be fun. Give them an unrestricted environment to try new ideas and kind of push the boundaries. B2B marketing needs that. So,
Man.
but yeah, I think the competitiveness in most of us would really make that interesting.
I like it. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Okay, cool. We got a couple more segments we want to run you through, Darien. You've been a great sport in going through this with us. Um, let's think of a demand creation plan. So we all know that as marketers, as B2B marketers, when we're putting together a plan, we do need to account for, among other things, demand capture. So essentially, how are we going to capture the qualified leads and the pipeline in this current quarter that will lead to revenue? But then we also want to account for demand creation. So let's zoom in on the demand creation portion of our annual plan. What are 5 things that you must have in your demand creation plan?
Oh, 5 programs?
Yeah, 5 programs that you absolutely, they're first thing on your list. You got to have these.
All right. Number one, content. Number two, blog. Or so by content, I mean social content.
Okay.
So ideally, you'd have a YouTube show.
Mm.
Ideally, you'd have a YouTube channel. This is again a hard move for most B2B companies, but ideally, you'd be figuring out a way to leverage YouTube. Um, if you can't, at bare minimum, you are on Twitter and LinkedIn. That's number one. So social content in one form or another. Number two would be a newsletter. You
Mm-hmm.
need editorial. You need a place where you can start to uh, explore the ideas, the narrative, the story, and the messages behind your company. So a newsletter where you can explore why you're building certain products, and you can arm your audience with and your customers with the message that they need. And part of the framework of creating conversations, you need to arm people
Wow.
with the sort of script that they can go and talk about, or at least create conversation around. So something that will create that. So generally, a newsletter, blogs are are a little bit harder to pull that off. Although the long form helps, newsletters tend to be better. And that's a whole spill there. The third thing would be figuring out a way to have in person or some form of events, either virtual or in person, whether that is a monthly, biweekly, whatever cadence is most appropriate. Uh, a video call where you can talk with your customers, where you can talk with prospects, where you can do a live Q&A, or you're having a monthly in-person meetup. If you can pull that off, you're in a space where you have a high concentration, or a city or a location where you have a high concentration of customers, where you can bring them all together, talk. So that is 3. 4 would be, now this is interesting. I would be trying to figure out how to use merch. And part of the reason why is because one, everyone wears clothes, or buys products,
Except
whether it's
on Naked and
clothes or whatever.
Afraid now. Let's not forget you did
Ex-
bring that up as a reference.
Except for negative rate. But if you've got something interesting,
Yeah.
you and people are probably likely to wear it if they like your product already, if they like your company. It's a great way it's a great way to build a brand. It's also been a great way to end a company. And in a few cases, we've seen where merch has been the demise of a company. Um, but I would figure that out also because it creates conversation, right? If Shopify has with they have an order counter or a revenue counter where they basically like every time your store gets a new order, this ticker moves to the like just consistently goes and tells you how many orders. Great merch because it creates conversation. And then the last piece would be some form of a conference. It again is hard to pull off, but if you can find some way to get a bunch of people in the room with other people who are not your own internal folks, your own marketers, your own salespeople, where you can leverage industry experts, where you can leverage industry influencers and start to create this conversation around the larger narrative of your brand. It just elevates you. It puts you on a different playing field. Even if you're not a huge brand, there's something about it's like the billboard effect. Seeing a company on a billboard automatically raises your idea of how large they are, how high quality they are, because who buys billboards? Not illegitimate companies, right? Not super small companies. So automatically, TV commercials just the same. Automatically, you're placed in this category of like high quality companies with high quality products, and conferences do the same.
Social content, newsletter, events, merch, and a conference. All right, man.
In a conference. It's
First,
hard. Lots of work.
y'all heard it here first, but I mean, it's all. None of this is like something coming out of left field. It's all doable, but I feel like you're providing context to help us understand why these things are all going to create conversation. They're going to put us in proximity with our ideal customer. We're going to be learning more along the way, so we're not actually necessarily starting out with like coming down from the mountain Moses with the tablets saying we have it all figured out. It's a lot of
Yeah.
give and take. We're part of the
Yep.
community, and in so doing we
Yep.
get more intelligent, our content gets better, and that creates more trust and affinity. This is dope. All
Yeah.
right. Before we go, one gotta go. So this is the final segment. This is the
All
one
right.
where we're finally gonna stump this dude right here. We're going to give Darien 3 items on a list. As a marketer, he gets to keep 2 of them, but one gotta go. You ready, Darien?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. Here's 3 things. You keep 2, one gotta go. Marketing ops expertise, performance marketing expertise, customer insight expertise. One gotta go.
I would say, oh, this actually did stump me. I would say maybe performance marketing expertise. I think you can still get distribution without it. I think without any good marketing ops, it's going to be hard to drive bottom or to communicate the story, understand how you're doing. I think obviously the bedrock of any good marketing is customer insights, which is its own thing because it's not as heralded as it should be.
True.
But customer insights and knowing how you're doing at the end of the day and being able to communicate that story, especially to leadership and boards, you need those both.
Okay. Hot takes. Sorry, Google. Y'all gotta go.
Bye.
Google ads anyway. All right, cool. Let's give him another 3. Did pretty good with that one. You could have 2 of these. One gotta go. Great brand reach, great brand recall, great brand resonance. So reach, recall, resonance. One gotta go.
I would choose reach. I want to be memorable.
What?
There's this. I know this. I know that's crazy. It's crazy, especially coming from me when I'm talking about distribution for
You trying to
80%
starve
of
us
the
out here,
podcast.
Darren. You trying to starve us, man.
So here's why I'd say reach. At the end of the day, my goal is to drive, like, again, we talked about content consumption. We talked about demand.
Right.
At the end of the day, I want people to really care about us.
Okay.
So if I've got a brand that has 300 customers
Yep.
that care deeply about our product
Right.
and really, really, really like our product.
Right.
I think that's much better than having 30,000 people that can see it. And you can extrapolate this out. 30 million people versus 3,000. Or like, it doesn't matter. As if people understand, remember us, right? They see our marketing and they remember us. That's a win. If people, I'd much rather have 40 people remember us than 4 million people see us and only 4 remember us, right? So that goes to like the spamming and the virality thing. Then the other thing, I want those 40 people who remember us to remember us deeply because we said something that they absolutely were like,
Right.
oh man, I'm turning this thought over forever. So yeah, I'd have to get rid of reach, which is hard, but yeah, that'd be my goal.
All right. We're gonna throw you a
Sorry.
curveball for the last one. Here's the curveball for Darien. You get to keep 2. One gotta go. Social content, newsletters, and events. We're using Darien's superpowers against him. Social content,
Oh
newsletters,
man,
and
that
events.
is actually good.
Keep 2. One gotta go.
I would say newsletters.
Whoa.
So I think so. Newsletters are mid funnel. If we never even talked about funnels and my disbelief in them, but newsletters would technically be mid funnel.
Okay.
I think you can pretty much achieve the same thing with events. If you've got the awareness channel, so you're able to drive attention, awareness, eyes to what you're doing in the first place via social, you're great. Newsletters are great for expounding on thoughts and building trust, but you can basically also do that with events. So I think you get a little bit of a 2-in-1 with events versus newsletters, which is like you're able to foster real community and have conversations, build customer insights with events. It's a little harder to do with newsletters. It's not impossible, but harder to do because it's one of many versus like having a bunch of one-on-one conversations. And so, and many to many, like all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, newsletters would be my goal.
The newsletter publisher kills newsletters. Unbelievable.
I know,
This
it's
is
insane. It's insane. That was a good one, though.
It's gonna be
That
on
was a good
TMZ.
question.
We're gonna put him on TMZ and totally misquote him. This is great. We've been listening, folks, to the Darien Payton. He's the founder of Antidote, the B2B audience development agency, the publisher of pros. Definitely check out that newsletter. It is one of my favorites. I look forward to it every week. This has been Darien Payton, Morehouse graduate, Chi-Town's finest. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Balaji.
All right, folks. We will see you on the next episode of Demand Wars. Bye for now.